Zane's spaceship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of the unknown planet. Warning lights flashed red, and alarms blared throughout the cockpit. The young human explorer gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles turning white from the effort. Come on," he muttered, trying to keep the ship steady. But it was no use. The ship was falling too fast, and the ground was rushing up to meet him. With a deafening crash, the spacecraft slammed into the planet's surface. Metal screeched and tore as the ship skidded across the rocky terrain. When it finally came to a stop, silence fell over the wreckage. Zane opened his eyes slowly, his head pounding. He was alive, but his ship was destroyed. Smoke filled the cockpit, making it hard to breathe. He had to get out. With shaking hands, Zane unbuckled his safety harness and pushed open the emergency hatch. Fresh air rushed in, and he gulped it down gratefully. He climbed out of the wreckage, his legs wobbling as he stepped onto the alien soil. The planet was unlike anything Zane had ever seen. The sky was a deep purple, and two small moons hung low on the horizon. Strange, twisting trees with silver leaves dotted the landscape. In the distance, tall mountains reached up into the clouds. Zane checked his suit's sensors. The air was breathable, but thin. He would have to be careful not to overexert himself. His communication device was broken, crushed in the crash. He was truly alone on this alien world. "Okay, Zane," he said to himself, trying to stay calm. "First things first, we need to find water and shelter." He gathered what supplies he could from the wreckage. Some food rations, a medical kit, and a small energy weapon for protection. With one last look at his ruined ship, Zane set off to explore this new world. As he walked, Zane couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The silver trees seemed to whisper as he passed, their leaves rustling even though there was no wind. Strange bird-like creatures with four wings circled overhead, their cries echoing across the alien landscape. After several hours of walking, Zane found a small stream of clear water. He knelt down to fill his water container, relieved to have found a source of hydration. But as he leaned over the water, he saw something that made his blood run cold. In the reflection of the stream, he saw a pair of glowing eyes watching him from the shadows of the trees. Zane spun around, his hand reaching for his energy weapon. What he saw made him freeze in terror. Emerging from the silver forest was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen or heard of. It was massive, easily twice his size, with a body covered in dark, shimmering scales. 6 powerful legs carried it forward, each ending in razor-sharp claws. But it was the creature's head that truly terrified Zane. It had no eyes that he could see, just smooth black skin where eyes should be. Its mouth was filled with rows of needle-like teeth, and 2 long tentacles extended from either side of its jaw, waving in the air as if tasting it. Zane had heard stories of this creature, whispered tales told in the darkest corners of space stations and frontier outposts. This was a shadow claw, the galaxy's deadliest predator. A species so feared that entire systems would be evacuated at the mere rumor of their presence. And now, Zane stood face to face with one. The shadow claw tilted its head, seeming to study Zane. Its tentacles twitched, reaching out towards him. Zane's fingers wrapped around his energy weapon, but he knew it would be useless against such a creature. In that moment, as fear threatened to overwhelm him, Zane noticed something. The shadow claw was favoring one of its legs. It was injured. Time seemed to slow down as Zane faced a choice. He could try to run, knowing he'd never outpace the creature. He could fight, a battle he was sure to lose. Or he could do something truly crazy. Taking a deep breath, Zane made his decision. Slowly, carefully, he reached into his pack and pulled out the medical kit. The shadow claw tensed, its tentacles whipping through the air. "It's okay," Zane said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his intent. "I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help." As Zane took a cautious step forward, the fate of both human and predator hung in the balance. Little did either of them know that this moment would change the course of galactic history forever. Zane's heart pounded in his chest as he inched closer to the injured Shadowclaw. The creature's tentacles twitched nervously, but it didn't attack. It seemed just as curious about Zane as he was about it. "Easy now," Zane said softly. He opened the medical kit, pulling out a device used for sealing wounds. The Shadowclaw's head tilted, its eyeless face somehow conveying confusion. Slowly, Zane pointed to the creature's injured leg, then to the medical device. "I can help," he said, making a patching motion with his hands. To Zane's surprise, the Shadowclaw slowly extended its injured leg towards him. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. This feared predator was trusting him. With trembling hands, Zane began to treat the wound. It was a deep gash, likely from a fight with another creature. As he worked, he noticed intricate patterns on the Shadowclaw's scales, like constellations mapped across its body. "You're beautiful, you know that," Zane murmured as he finished sealing the wound. "I think I'll call you Nyx. It means night in an old Earth language." The newly named Nyx made a low rumbling sound, almost like a purr. It flexed its healed leg, then turned its attention back to Zane. Its tentacles reached out, gently touching Zane's face and arms. Zane held perfectly still, realizing that this was how Nyx saw the world. The tentacles were incredibly sensitive, gathering information through touch and possibly other senses humans didn't have. Suddenly, Nyx's head snapped up. Its tentacles went rigid, pointing towards the forest. A moment later, Zane heard it too, a low, menacing growl. From the silver trees emerged 3 more creatures. They looked like a cross between Earth's wolves and lizards, with scales instead of fur and long, whip-like tails. Their eyes glowed with hunger as they stalked towards Zane and Nyx. Zane reached for his energy weapon, but he knew it wouldn't be enough against 3 attackers. He backed up slowly, bumping into Nyx. To his shock, the Shadowclaw moved in front of him, as if to protect him. The wolf lizards attacked as one. They leaped through the air, jaws open and claws extended. But Nyx was faster. Its tentacles lashed out, wrapping around 2 of the attackers and slamming them into the ground. The 3rd creature got past Nyx's defenses, heading straight for Zane. Without thinking, Zane fired his energy weapon. The blast caught the wolf lizard in mid-jump, sending it tumbling to the side. It wasn't a killing shot, but it was enough to make the creature think twice about attacking again. Nyx made quick work of the other 2 attackers, its strength and speed unlike anything Zane had ever seen. Within moments, all 3 wolf lizards were fleeing back into the forest, yelping in fear and pain. As the sounds of the retreating creatures faded, Zane turned to Nyx in awe. You protected me," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Nyx's tentacles reached out again, this time wrapping gently around Zane's arm. The touch wasn't threatening. It felt almost friendly. Zane laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. "Well, Nyx, I guess we're stuck with each other now. Partners." Nyx made that rumbling purr again, nodding its head in what seemed like agreement. As the purple sky began to darken, Zane realized he needed to find shelter for the night. "Come on," he said to Nyx. "Let's find a safe place to rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out how to get off this planet." Together, the human and the Shadowclaw set off into the alien landscape. It was the beginning of an unlikely friendship, one that would soon shake the very foundations of the galaxy. As they walked, Zane couldn't help but smile. He had come to this planet expecting to find only danger and isolation. Instead, he had found Nyx. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for understanding between different species after all. Little did Zane know that his simple act of kindness towards Nyx would set in motion a chain of events that would change the course of galactic history forever. The adventure was just beginning. 3 months had passed since Zane's crash landing on the alien planet. In that time, he and Nyx had grown inseparable. They had explored the strange world together, learning to communicate through a mix of gestures, sounds, and the unique sensory abilities of Nex's tentacles. Zane had managed to repair his ship's communication system, sending out a distress signal, but he was no longer sure he wanted to be rescued. The bond he had formed with Nyx was unlike anything he had ever experienced. One day, as they were foraging for food, Zane's repaired communicator crackled to life. A voice came through, filled with static but unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel, this is the Galactic Patrol ship Stargazer. We've received your distress signal. Prepare for rescue." Zane's heart raced. He looked at Nyx, who tilted its head in curiosity. "Well, buddy," Zane said, "looks like our little secret is about to get out." Hours later, the sleek form of the Stargazer broke through the planet's atmosphere. It landed in a clearing not far from Zane's crash site. As the ship's doors opened, Zane stood tall, Nyx by his side. The rescue team emerged, weapons drawn. Their eyes widened in shock and fear at the sight of the Shadow Claw. "Step away from the creature," the team leader shouted. Zane raised his hands. "Wait, this is Nyx. He's my friend. He won't hurt anyone." The rescue team looked at each other in disbelief. One of them whispered, "Is that human insane? Doesn't he know what that thing is?" Slowly, carefully, Zane explained his story. How Nyx had protected him, how they had learned to communicate and work together. The rescue team listened with a mix of awe and skepticism. "This is unprecedented," the team leader finally said. "We need to report this to Galactic Command immediately." Within days, news of Zane and Nyx's friendship spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Holographic news reports buzzed with excitement and fear. Footage of Zane and Nyx together, captured by the rescue team, played on repeat on every channel. On the bustling space station Nebula 9, aliens of all species gathered around view screens, watching in amazement. A human, friends with a shadow claw. "Impossible," a tentacled Zorblaxian exclaimed. "Perhaps we've misjudged these creatures," a wise old Qualuvian mused, his 3 eyes blinking thoughtfully. But not everyone was thrilled by this development. In the dark corners of the galaxy, those with a deep-seated fear and hatred of aliens began to plot. On board the Stargazer, now headed back to Earth, Zane sat in his quarters, Nyx curled up beside him. A holographic projection of Admiral Chen, the head of the Galactic Patrol, flickered to life. "Mr. Zane," the Admiral began, her face serious, "your discovery has caused quite a stir. Some are hailing you as a hero, a pioneer of interspecies cooperation. Others," she paused, her expression grim, "others see you as a threat to galactic security." Zane felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, Admiral?" "There are those who believe the Shadow Claws should be eradicated, not befriended. They fear your actions will lead to the downfall of humanity and other sentient species." Nyx, sensing Zane's distress, wrapped a comforting tentacle around his arm. Zane took a deep breath, drawing strength from his friend's presence. "Admiral," he said, his voice firm, "Nyx and I are living proof that cooperation is possible. We can learn from each other, grow together. Isn't that what space exploration is all about?" Admiral Chen nodded slowly. "I agree, Mr. Zane. But be prepared. The road ahead will not be easy. There are many who will stand against you." As the hologram flickered out, Zane turned to Nyx. The Shadow Claw's eyeless face was turned towards him, tentacles gently probing the air. "Well, buddy," Zane said with a weak smile, "looks like we've stirred up quite a hornet's nest, but we'll face it together, right?" Nyx made a low, rumbling sound of agreement. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them side by side, human and Shadow Claw, defying the expectations of an entire galaxy. As the Stargazer sped towards Earth, Zane couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of a new era of understanding, or the start of a galactic conflict unlike any before? Only time would tell. The Stargazer docked at Earth's orbital station, with a soft hiss of airlocks engaging. Zane stood at the viewport, Nyx by his side, both gazing at the blue-green planet below. It should have been a triumphant return, but Zane felt only unease. "Ready, buddy?" Zane asked, glancing at his Shadowclaw friend. Nyx's tentacles waved gently, a gesture Zane had come to recognize as affirmation. As they stepped off the ship, they were met not with the expected team of scientists and officials, but with a squad of heavily armed security personnel. Admiral Chen stood at their center, her face grim. "Mr. Zane," she said, her voice tight, "I'm afraid there's been a development. We need to move you and Nyx to a secure location immediately." Before Zane could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red emergency lights began to flash. Admiral Chen's hand flew to her earpiece, her eyes widening in shock. "It's happening already," she muttered. Then, louder, "Move. We need to get to the safe room now." As they ran through the station's corridors, Zane heard the sound of explosions in the distance. Nyx moved with incredible speed, keeping pace easily despite the cramped space. They reached a heavily reinforced door just as another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. Admiral Chen quickly input a code, and the door slid open. They rushed inside, the door sealing behind them with a heavy thunk. "What's going on?" Zane demanded, trying to catch his breath. Admiral Chen's face was grim. "It's the Purifiers, an extremist anti-alien group. Somehow they found out about your arrival time. They're here too." She paused, glancing at Nyx, "to eliminate what they see as a threat." Zane felt a chill run down his spine. He moved closer to Nyx, who was alert, tentacles twitching as if trying to sense danger through the station's walls. "But why?" Zane asked. "We haven't done anything wrong. Nyx is peaceful." "Fear, Mr. Zane," the Admiral replied. "Fear of the unknown. The Shadowclaws have been seen as monsters for so long. Your friendship with Nyx challenges everything they believe." A voice crackled over the room's comm system. "Admiral, the Purifiers have breached the main docking bay. They're demanding we hand over the human and the Shadowclaw." Admiral Chen's jaw tightened. "Absolutely not. Prepare for full station lockdown." She turned to Zane and Nyx. "I'm sorry, but you can't stay here. It's not safe. We need to get you off the station." "And go where?" Zane asked, feeling overwhelmed. "There's a small, fast ship docked in the emergency bay. It's stocked with supplies. You'll have to lay low for a while, until we can root out the Purifiers and ensure your safety." Zane looked at Nyx, saw the steady resolve in his friend's posture. They were in this together, no matter what. He nodded at the Admiral. "Okay, we'll do it." They moved swiftly through hidden maintenance corridors, the sounds of fighting echoing distantly. Finally, they'd reached the small ship. It was sleek, built for speed and stealth. As Zane and Nyx boarded, Admiral Chen handed him a small data chip. Emergency contacts, safe locations, and some, let's call them friends in high places. Trust no one else. Zane took the chip, feeling the weight of its importance. "Thank you, Admiral, for everything." She nodded grimly. "Good luck, both of you. And Zane, take care of each other. What you and Nyx represent, it might just be the future of galactic peace. Don't let them take that away." With a final nod, Zane sealed the ship's hatch. He and Nyx settled into the cockpit, the controls lighting up under Zane's touch. As the ship detached from the station and shot into the star-filled void, Zane felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were fugitives now, hunted by those who feared change. But they were also pioneers, the living proof that humans and Shadowclaws could not just coexist, but form deep bonds of friendship. "Well, Nyx," Zane said, plotting a course into the unknown, "looks like our adventure is just beginning." Nyx rumbled in agreement, tentacles gently resting on Zane's shoulder. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, human and Shadowclaw against the galaxy. As Earth faded behind them, Zane couldn't help but smile. They might be on the run, But somehow, he had never felt more alive. The hunt had begun, but so had their chance to change the galaxy forever. 3 weeks had passed since Zane and Nix's daring escape from Earth's orbital station. Their small ship, which Zane had nicknamed Whisper, drifted silently in the shadow of a large asteroid. They had been hopping from one hiding spot to another, always staying one step ahead of the purifiers. Zane sat in the cockpit, studying the data chip Admiral Chen had given him. Nix lounged nearby, tentacles lazily exploring the ship's controls. "Look at this, Nix," Zane said, pointing to a blinking dot on the holographic map. "It's a remote research station on a moon called Erebus. The note says it's run by a scientist who's been studying Shadowclaw history." Nix perked up, tentacles waving with interest. Over the past weeks, Zane had gotten better at interpreting his friend's silent language. "You think we should check it out?" Zane asked. Nix nodded, a human gesture he had picked up from Zane. With a deep breath, Zane fired up the ship's engines. "All right, buddy. Let's go uncover some secrets." Erebus was a small, dark moon orbiting a gas giant. As they approached, Zane saw a single structure on its surface, a dome-shaped building with a few smaller outbuildings around it. They landed Whisper a short distance away. As they stepped out onto the moon's surface, Zane marveled at how lightly he bounced with each step in the low gravity. Suddenly, Nix froze, tentacles rigid. A moment later, Zane heard it too, a low humming sound coming from behind a nearby rock formation. "Who's there?" a voice called out. "If you're with the purifiers, I warn you, this facility is well defended." Zane raised his hands. "We're not purifiers. I'm Zane, the human who befriended a Shadowclaw. This is Nix. We're here to learn." There was a pause, then a figure stepped out from behind the rocks. It was an older woman, her hair gray and wild, wearing a worn environmental suit. Her eyes widened as she saw Nix. "By the stars," she whispered. "It's true, a human and a Shadowclaw working together. I'm Dr. Lyra Venn. Please, come inside quickly. It's not safe out here." Inside the research station, Dr. Venn led them to a room filled with ancient artifacts and holographic displays. "I've dedicated my life to studying the Shadowclaws," she explained. "Most thought I was crazy, wasting my time on monsters. But I knew there had to be more to their story." She activated a large holographic display. It showed images of Shadowclaws, but unlike any Zane had seen before, these Shadowclaws wore ornate armor and carried strange, staff-like weapons. "What you're seeing," Dr. Venn said, her voice filled with excitement, "are images of the Shadowclaw Guardians. They weren't just predators. They were protectors, peacekeepers of the ancient galaxy." Zane turned to Nix, who was staring at the images, tentacles waving slowly. "Is this true, buddy? Is this who your people used to be?" Nix made a low, mournful sound. Dr. Venn nodded. "I believe the Shadowclaw's fearsome reputation is a tragic misunderstanding. Thousands of years ago, they fought to protect the galaxy from a terrible threat. But something went wrong. They were betrayed, their history erased." She pulled up another image, this one showing the Shadowclaw and a human-like figure standing side by side. "This is the most astounding part. There's evidence that humans and Shadowclaws once worked together, maybe even lived together in peace." Zane felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at Nix, saw his own wonder reflected in his friend's posture. "So, our friendship, it's not new. It's a reconnection." Dr. Venn nodded excitedly. "Exactly. You and Nix aren't an anomaly. You're a return to an ancient alliance." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station. Dr. Venn rushed to a console, her face paling. "Oh no, ships are approaching. Purifier ships." Zane's heart raced. "They found us. Doctor, you need to come with us. Your research, it could change everything." As they rushed to gather what they could of Dr. Venn's research, Zane's mind whirled. The Shadowclaws, once guardians of the galaxy, humans and Shadowclaws, ancient allies. It was almost too much to believe. But as he looked at Nix, saw the determination in his friend's stance, Zane knew it was true. They weren't just running for their lives now. They were fighting to reclaim a lost history, to restore a broken alliance. As they raced back to Whisper, the first shots from the purifier ships streaked across Erebus's dark sky. Zane, Nix, and Dr. Venn had uncovered a truth that could shake the foundations of the galaxy. Now, they just had to live long enough to share it. The Whisper shot through space, engines straining as Zane pushed the small ship to its limits. Behind them, 3 larger purifier ships gave chase, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly energy blasts. "Hold on," Zane shouted as he swerved to avoid another blast. In the co-pilot's seat, Nix's tentacles flew over the controls, managing the ship's energy distribution with incredible speed and precision. In the back, Dr. Venn clutched her data drives, her life's work on Shadowclaw history. "We can't outrun them forever," Dr. Venn said, her voice tense. "We need a plan." Zane's mind raced. Then he saw it. A dense asteroid field ahead. "Everyone, brace yourselves. We're going in." The Whisper dove into the field, weaving between massive rocks. 2 of the purifier ships followed, while the third hung back, likely to cut them off if they escaped. "Nix, I need you to be our eyes," Zane said. "Your senses are better than any scanner." Nix rumbled in agreement, tentacles spreading out to cover more of the ship's sensors. With Nix's guidance, they navigated the treacherous field, the pursuing ships falling further behind. Suddenly, Nix made an urgent sound. One tentacle pointed to a large, hollow asteroid ahead. "You want us to go in there?" Zane asked, surprised. Nix nodded vigorously. Trusting his friend, Zane steered the Whisper into a narrow opening in the asteroid. Inside, they found an ancient structure, clearly artificial. "Incredible," Dr. Venn breathed. "This looks like a Shadowclaw outpost." They landed the Whisper inside the structure. As they exited the ship, the walls of the outpost came to life, glowing with soft blue light. Nix moved confidently through the station, leading them to a central chamber. There they found a large crystalline device. "It's some kind of communication array," Dr. Venn said, examining the technology with wonder. "But it's far more advanced than anything I've ever seen." Nix approached the device, tentacles reaching out to touch its surface. Suddenly, the crystal lit up, projecting a massive hologram that filled the chamber. It showed scenes from the past, Shadowclaws and humans working together, building great cities, exploring the stars side by side. Then came images of a terrible war, a dark force threatening the galaxy. The Shadowclaws fought bravely, protecting other species. But then came the betrayal. Fearful of the Shadowclaws' power, some human leaders turned against them. The alliance was broken, the Shadowclaws branded as monsters, their true history erased. As the hologram faded, Zane, Nix, and Dr. Venn stood in stunned silence. "We have to share this with the galaxy," Zane said finally. "Everyone needs to know the truth." Dr. Venn nodded. "This outpost must have a powerful transmitter. If we can broadcast this message, it could change everything." Just then, they heard the sound of ships landing outside. The purifiers had found them. "Keep working on the broadcast," Zane said. "Nix and I will hold them off." Zane and Nix rushed to the entrance, ready to make their stand. But as the purifiers burst in, weapons raised, Zane had an idea. "Wait," he shouted. "Before you shoot, there's something you need to see." To everyone's surprise, Nix stepped forward. His tentacles touched the wall, and suddenly, the entire outpost came alive with holograms, showing the true history of humans and Shadowclaws. The purifiers lowered their weapons, watching in amazement. Even their leader, a hard-faced woman, seemed shaken. "It's a trick," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's the truth," Zane replied. "The Shadowclaws were never our enemies. They were our allies, our protectors. We've been fighting the wrong war for centuries." As the holograms played on, Zane saw doubt, and then understanding dawned on the Purifier's faces. The leader slowly lowered her weapon completely. "If this is true," she said, "then everything we believed was a mistake," Zane finished. "But now we have a chance to fix it, to rebuild what was lost." At that moment, Dr. Ven's voice came over the outpost's speakers. "Broadcast successful. The message is being transmitted across the galaxy." Zane turned to the Purifiers. "You have a choice now. Continue fighting a war based on lies, or help us restore a partnership that once made the galaxy a better place." The Purifier leader looked at Nyx, then back at Zane. Slowly, she extended her hand. "I think it's time we talked." As Human and Shadowclaw stood side by side, facing their former enemies, Zane felt a surge of hope. The tide was turning. The truth was out. Now, the real work of rebuilding trust could begin. 1 year had passed since the revelation at the Shadowclaw outpost. Zane stood on a balcony overlooking a vast plaza on Earth, Nyx by his side. Below them, a sea of faces, human and alien alike, waited in anticipation. "Ready, buddy?" Zane asked, glancing at his Shadowclaw friend. Nyx's tentacles waved confidently, a gesture that now brought smiles rather than fear to those who saw it. They stepped forward to the podium. Cameras floated nearby, broadcasting the event across the galaxy. Zane took a deep breath and began to speak. "1 year ago, we uncovered a truth that changed everything. We learned that humans and Shadowclaws were not enemies, but ancient allies. Today, we take the first step towards restoring that alliance." Nyx stepped forward, his tentacles activating a holographic display. It showed images of the past year, humans and Shadowclaws working together to rebuild trust, learning from each other, forming new bonds of friendship. "It hasn't been easy," Zane continued. "Centuries of fear and misunderstanding don't disappear overnight. But look how far we've come." A hologram shifted to show a new space station orbiting Earth. Its design was a blend of human and Shadowclaw architecture, a symbol of their renewed partnership. "Today, we open the Harmony Station," Zane announced. "The first of many joint projects between our species. It will serve as a center for cultural exchange, scientific research, and interspecies cooperation." A cheer went up from the crowd. Zane saw humans and Shadowclaws standing side by side, some even exchanging friendly touches, a sight unimaginable just a year ago. Dr. Ven stepped up to the podium next. Her wild hair was now streaked with more gray, but her eyes shone with excitement. "The research we've conducted over the past year has been extraordinary," she said. "We've only scratched the surface of what we can learn from each other. The Shadowclaw's sensory abilities, their intuitive understanding of complex systems, combined with human creativity and adaptability, there's no limit to what we can achieve together." As if on cue, a massive shadow fell over the plaza. People looked up in awe as a huge Shadowclaw ship descended from the clouds. Its design was both ancient and new, a recreation of the guardian vessels of old. The ship's hull opened, and a group of Shadowclaws emerged. They wore the ornate armor of their ancestors, but with modern touches. At their lead was a familiar face, or rather, a familiar eyeless head. "Nyx," Zane gasped in surprise. His friend nodded, then gestured to his armor. Zane understood. Nyx had been chosen as a new guardian, a protector of the renewed alliance. Zane felt a surge of pride and a twinge of sadness. Their days of adventure together might be coming to an end, but a new chapter was beginning. The lead Purifier, now an advocate for peace, stepped forward. "On behalf of those who once feared the unknown, I pledge our full support to this alliance. We were wrong, and we're grateful for the chance to make amends." Zane nodded in acknowledgement, then turned back to the crowd. "There will be challenges ahead. Old fears don't die easily. But remember this moment. Remember how it feels to stand together, not as separate species, but as united citizens of the galaxy. He placed a hand on Nyx's armor. My friend once showed me that understanding can overcome fear. Now, it's up to all of us to carry that lesson forward. As the crowd cheered, Zane saw hope in every face. Human, Shadowclaw, and the many other species who had come to witness this historic moment. The Harmony Station above twinkled in the sunlight, a beacon of what was possible when different species came together. Warships were being repurposed for exploration and scientific missions. The galaxy was entering a new age of peace and discovery. Zane couldn't help but smile. From a crashed ship on a distant planet to this moment, it had been an incredible journey. As he stood there, with Nyx and their allies both old and new, he knew that the greatest adventures were still to come. The era of fear was over. The age of harmony had begun, and it all started with one unlikely friendship between a human and a Shadowclaw.